Alrighty, welcome to the Join or Die podcast. I'm your co-host JT, followed by my co-host Eddie, and we have the craziest first episode for you guys. And while you're here, make sure you like and subscribe. We're going to start out with talking about Joe Biden possibly doing blow in the White House, which I find to be a crazy story. Next, we'll talk about the Blackout of the Sound of Freedom movie, which also happens to blow my mind. Next up on the list is a Parkland shooter and a Supreme Court case, and Eddie has a ton to say
information
about
on that for sure.
Yeah. Next, if you guys don't know, if you work out consistently, you are now an alt-right conspiracy theorist. So we'll talk about
white supremacist,
all of it, dude. So we're going to talk about that from the MSNBC. And we have two more articles. The Michigan House State Representatives, misgendering is now a criminal offense or may soon be once it gets passed by the Senate, followed by the cluster bombs being sent to Ukraine.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, hey, man. Well, let's just get into this. So substance found in the White House West Wing tests positive for cocaine, the New York Post writes. So the unknown item found in the West Wing that forced a brief evacuation of the White House Sunday night and drew a hazmat team to the executive mansion initially tested positive for cocaine, according to the officials and the dispatch call made that evening. So I quote, "We have a yellow bar stating cocaine hydrochloride," which I found pretty interesting at the very beginning because who's labeling their blow just like that, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, dude, I got the top of the market. You know what's in it? Hydrochloride. Like, oh, man, that just sounds awesome.
Yeah, so, but again, it goes on. So a DC firefighter stated in a radio communication at 8:49 p.m. Sunday, "Bag it up and take it out," end of quote. The fire told the hazmat team. So I think this story has been developing. We've heard multiple stories. At first, it was at the West Wing in the library. Secondly, it was in the West Wing. It was somewhere in a different location. Then it was in the Situation Room. Then it was in a cubby. So the fact that it keeps changing, the fact that, we're hearing a different story. And again, it's still developing. We're still trying to get to the bottom of this. Leads me to believe, I don't know if I believe you.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, there are multiple layers to this. Mm-hmm. Hunter Biden is on pretty much his parole. So if he gets caught with any sort of cocaine, it's 10 years automatically in prison. Mm-hmm. So which is why I believe that they're undercovering it. And it's also, this cocaine is the size of a dime. It's not really that much coke. I never knew Joe Biden was going to go skiing in the middle of summer. I didn't know he was skiing down the slopes. A couple other things on this one, man. When you look at it, the White House is saying that Joe Biden wasn't actually there for most of the day. But when I looked at the itinerary, he left to go to Camp David, which for people who are listening and don't know what Camp David is, it's a 200-acre facility in Maryland, which is pretty much just an oasis for political people, for world leaders across the world. They all meet at Camp David. And he left at that place at 6:45 p.m., a.k.a. Biden or whoever was there the whole day, and he ended up leaving at 6:45. And all I got to say on this, man, is I guess Joe Biden is starting his debate prep early.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because, I think it's funny enough that he's going on a ski, which is kind of funny, in the sense of, is that a euphemism for cocaine? Are you riding cocaine, right? But maybe not. but anyways, yeah, the thing that really got me is, well, besides the way that I just stated that, the story keeps changing. We keep saying it's being found in the West Wing, as we see over here, or it was at the ground level where the residence is, or now it's in a cubby. So I know during the press, Secretary Jean-Pierre, they kept asking her, and she was losing her mind, couldn't answer.
Right.
But she was, if I remember correctly, she was talking about how, that's not impossible because they were at their trip, and this was found like a day later or two. I don't remember exactly the day or the timeline here, but I do know for a fact that when she was being asked, how can it be them when they're not here? It's I don't know, maybe they could have left it. It's that simple, right?
Or she was obviously lying. We know from their itinerary and from what she said the day later that she wasn't there.
Right.
And what it really is it's such a high traffic area, and it's not hard to say, I don't know where it comes from. Yeah, it probably could have came from one of us, but it also most likely didn't come from one of us. And as for me personally, I don't really care who's doing blow in the White House. Exactly. I don't care if there's blow in the White House. I care about two things. One, how it got there. And two, they had to evacuate everybody in that White House, which means all the White House tours going on, all the presidents, all the cabinet members, even the dog, bro. The dog was caught up in the cocaine scandal, which blows my mind. Imagine being a little kid. You're like 12, 13 years old, and they say, we got to evacuate the White House. And then you turn on your news later and find out that, oh, yeah, Daddy Biden's doing cocaine.
And if there's a real tragedy, it was with the dog.
That was the real tragedy, man. That was a real tragedy.
Yeah, and I know they were trying to switch it to the area where it's a little bit more highly populated, where there's more people who are visiting the White House. I think more as an alibi where it's like, well, it can't possibly be the Biden family.
Yeah.
Like, there's millions of people. Well, not millions, but like maybe like a year.
Probably hundreds of people, man.
Yeah, hundreds of people walking through these, you know, these aisles, these halls and whatnot. So it couldn't possibly be that. But again, it keeps changing. It keeps switching. But when this news broke, which is kind of funny, we got the story about how Biden was driving through the Nevada desert. And for some reason, he wants to continually and perpetually, rightfully so, because, you know, the audience and America needs to be entertained to some capacity. But how he always tends to like vlog everything. And so what we got from this vlog, when he was like driving down the Nevada desert, driving at 172 miles an hour, smoking crack, I just don't understand this man in the sense of like, does he ever like come down and like ask himself, you know what, maybe I shouldn't film this one?
Right.
You know,
and
like,
you're talking about Hunter Biden.
Hunter, sorry. Yeah,
you said Joe.
Hunter Biden.
Daddy Joe ain't driving 117.
Oh, dude.
That dude's almost 117 himself, man.
And if he's driving, someone get him out of the wheel. He's probably in no position to be driving.
Right.
I mean, do you remember when he fell off that bike?
Yeah.
So, like,
dude, this president is not in a good mental state.
No.
I'm at the point, and there's this huge TikTok, you know, following and blowing up saying, we want to vote for whoever's younger. And stories like this, the young people like me, they don't really care about the cocaine in the White House. To me, it's just a joke story meant to make fun of the Biden administration. Yeah. But for people who are older who don't understand the culture of young culture, they're like, man, this is an impeachable offense. This is equivalent to Watergate. But it's not. It's not at the end of the day. It's just a little bit of coke, a little bit of blow, and we all know who did the blow. Yeah. The one person who has a routine history of it. And also, if it was a lot of blow, I probably would have cared more. But it's the size of a dime, man. A dime. That's like what, 0.2 of a gram, maybe.
Yeah,
it's
nothing. Just trying to have a great time.
Right. He just wanted a little pick me up. Maybe Biden wanted it. Maybe he needed to get from point A to point B, talking to Putin. You know, I guess he was putting the snow down. You never know, man.
I mean, he's barely animated these days.
Right.
And whatever is animated is like, is it even coherent? So yeah, it could be like, it was just a little pick me up, you know, just to get him like, you know.
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, because it's not a surprise that anyone in Capitol Hill, anyone, doesn't matter who, whether you're the president, you're a senator, House of or part of the House of Representatives, anywhere in Congress, it doesn't matter. Like, we know everyone's doing, like, they have crazy parties.
Oh yeah.
Some of them are swingers, you know.
Right.
Like, this isn't like a surprise to anyone.
No.
Can you imagine like if Donald Trump would be the one being accused of this?
That would be insane, man. Dude, they would be knocking on his door.
Oh, he'd be pilloried.
Oh, yeah.
They'd be knocking on his door for sure.
He'd be Hillaried for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pitchforks and everything.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like, it's kind of a silly story in the sense of like, yeah, you know, like, the way you mentioned it, it's a little dime.
Who really
and
cares,
everyone's
buddy?
doing it, like,
Who cares?
Whatever. And are you familiar with Occam's razor?
No.
It's basically the most probable of the outcomes the most simpler of explanation is the actual like outcome, you know?
Right.
So Occam's razor basically suggests it's like, dude, it's probably Biden. Like,
yeah, it's one of them.
Like, it's not a surprise at this point, anyone, especially with like the whole laptop story or finding all these videos and pictures of him, you know, actually criminalizing himself.
Right.
Because again, he has an issue with like, not restraining himself and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't document this one, but I don't know. Maybe it could be an ego thing.
No, I think he does have an ego. I don't know if you read the story earlier this week. We don't have it on the stream, but it was where Biden was reportedly yelling at everybody underneath him, his aides, his vice president. I mean, he was like dropping F-bombs left and right.
And this is Joe Biden?
Yeah, no, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe is what Trump calls him.
Interesting.
And so what I really think what's happening is they're planting the seeds to make Joe Biden later in the election cycle seem a whole lot more young, someone who's in touch with the young, who's passionate, who's fiery, angry. I mean, come on. If Joe Biden's yelling at his aides left and right, we would have heard about it the first 2.5 years. But what do you know?
True.
You know, it's year 3, almost 3.5, and we don't hear now. We're just now hearing about it. Come on.
You know what? I do recall the article. I never got into it, but yeah, you're right. Where he was yelling at his staff, and they were trying to play it off like, "Oh, this is what he does."
Right.
He just gets a little angry.
Right. And I think we might have found the answer as to why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's the blow, buddy. It's the blow. You got to stop that.
Oh, dude, absolutely. But yeah, to me, it just seems kind of silly. Like, you know, there's this. I mean, I get it. It is part of the law. It is a criminal offense to have drugs and things of that sort. But again, I come back to like, man, imagine what. Well, there's two things. If this was Donald Trump, immediately he'd be, again, getting his knocks. They'd probably raid his home again in Mar-a-Lago and everything. But I also see it in the sense of like, he would probably just own it. Being Donald Trump, it's like, yeah, I did a little bit of coke. Everyone
I didn't mean to do
it.
the coke.
And he did his accordion hand. So like, part of me is like, man, if this ever like happens where maybe he is being indicted about, you know, possibly having some drugs, I just know that I could count on him to just own it and be like, so what?
Right.
You know, yes, I did it, but you know you do too.
Right.
You know, so.
Well, and that's part of the story. But also another part of the story is this is the main news cycle that's covering up for us for the past week. This is all we've been hearing about. And the American people do not care who is doing coke. It's been around so often. People don't care.
Yeah.
And there's other more bombshell stories. Like the Sound of Freedom story.
Dude.
Oh, man. We might as well go through that now. That Sound of Freedom story is crazy. There's been a media blackout. Have you seen the movie?
Oh, dude, absolutely. So,
man.
Well, that's a good segue, maybe. A good segue would have been, you know who else does coke? South America. And where does this take place? South America.
Or, you know what blows? The media coverage of the movie.
Exactly. But yeah, let's move on to this next story. So we mentioned we're going to talk about this. Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms.
Crazy, man. Just disrespectful.
Yep. This, you know, thriller about child trafficking. And it's designed to appeal to the conscience of conspiracy addled boomers. So the story reads, oh no. It's okay. Not a big deal. But yeah, this whole week has been a storm of just trashing and degrading this
movie,
film.
man. And it's a great movie. I cried in the theater, and I'm a grown man. I don't cry, but I cried in the middle of the theater, and so did everybody else near me, man. There was a grandma near me. I gave her a napkin, buddy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was raising up the grandma in this movie.
Dude, I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
I will admit, I have not seen it, but I think it's been in the news cycle. Everyone's been talking about it.
Right.
And like, you know, just throwing little scenes here and there. But I think we all get what this story's about. And the story is about, which I don't understand because like the news, mainstream outlets are saying all these things about it, but all this thing is trying to do is like have an awareness, right?
Right.
So I don't really understand. Well, except I do understand. Because,
I don't understand, except I do understand.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't understand like the logic of it, except unless, maybe.
Well, no, for those who haven't seen the movie, this movie pretty much covers, based on a true story of a guy named Tim, who Tim was in charge. He was arresting pedophiles in the United States, people who were consuming pedophilia, which I don't even know if I'm allowed to say, but whatever. And
I think you are.
And so he decided he was fed up with that. He wanted to make a bigger change, and he wanted to take down a bigger ring. And so he took down, through Homeland Security, part of it, and then went away from Homeland Security, huge trafficking ring all across Colombia. He went into some of the rebellious territories, saving girls, and it all was inspired by this one child in the movie. I don't want to spoil the movie, but that's the gist of it. Now, there are some homages. Yeah, homages. There are some homages to, you know, Epstein and his island. They do literally go to a private island on the movie. But what I find shocking, before we get into that, is all of these major headlines of all these movies, and I have them written down here. Here it is. Why anti-trafficking experts are torching Sound of Freedom. The right-wing adjacent thriller Seducing America, promoting a dramatic response. A kernel of truth that feeds conspiracy. Guys, this is a child movie. This is a movie about trafficking children. It's a movie that brings you to tears. And at the end of the movie, they show real life proof of what happened in black and white photos of what happened. They documented it. And if you can't afford a ticket, they have an open area. You just got to type in angel.com/something, and they'll give you a free ticket to see this movie.
Oh, shoot.
And it's brought in so far $40 million.
And I think this morning hit finally like 41. I mean, it's a little leap, but still like.
Well, yeah,
it's
especially
pretty
considering
impressive.
who it's up against, man.
Yeah, I mean Indiana Jones, we got Element, but you know,
Transformers,
Disney
Mission Impossible, like these aren't just like random romance or rom-coms. These are blockbuster hits. Transformers, Mission Impossible, Insidious is another one too.
Yeah, what's going against the
Elementals.
Goliaths of the entertainment industry?
Yeah.
And just by I mean, you mentioned, so I know from my understanding it was like a 14.5 budget film.
Yeah.
And it generated that in the release day, so it's pretty big. So that's good right off the bat, or right off the bat. And so I checked this morning, and it's like flirting around the areas in the higher 40 mils. So man, it's getting good traction. It doesn't seem like the mainstream media is, although they're trying to downplay this film, I don't think it's working.
No,
I think
I'm
people are
glad for
waking
the
up to this.
Blackout, man. I'm glad for the Blackout because I wouldn't have saw it if I didn't hear that Blackout. If anybody's watching, if the media is not covering something, it typically means that you should probably cover it.
Yeah.
You should probably cover it.
Yeah, if the mainstream's telling you one thing, you should probably go for the other.
And there's a little bit of irony in this movie as well. So this movie was originally filmed by Fox Entertainment way when, like 6 years ago. And then when Disney bought out Fox, they trashed the movie and said, nope, we don't want the movie anymore. So then Angel Studios, the people producing the movie, is a Mormon studio, religiously affiliated. They bought the movie, marketed it, and then put it out, which they didn't even really market it. They pretty much just bought it, went through 5 years of legal hurdles to put it out, and then put it out and hopes that the word of mouth spreads on it.
And that was the reason, too, because why there was a delay, right? Because from my understanding, they finished the film in 2018, but the delay between then and now, what was it, Warner? Or
probably Warner. I wouldn't be surprised.
Warner, who
I don't know the exact.
They were going to release it through the vehicle. They were going to release it through.
I'm not too sure which vehicle.
I know it was going to be a big.
It was something affiliated with
production
Fox, for sure.
film.
Huge production.
Yeah, but from my understanding, I could be wrong. That was the reason for the delay because it's been 5 years since it was finished, but they decided to bring it out in 2023. Of this year. When was it? July 4th, right?
On Independence Day.
Which is another like.
Oh yeah. I mean, this movie was shot 6 years ago, guys, and it doesn't even look like it was shot 6 years ago. This movie looked like it was shot 2 years ago, and the storyline is so good that it pains me to see all these left-wing media outlets just trashing it. There's no need to trash it, guys. There's no need. This movie is a great movie, and just because the creator of it is someone who believes in a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories doesn't make the movie all bad. And if you are a right-wing conspiracy theorist, you can care about sex trafficking without the conspiracy.
Exactly. You could separate these two.
You can separate them. We know they're intertwined, but you can separate those two because most people don't agree that they're intertwined.
But yeah, I mean, they're trying to just mash all this stuff. And you mentioned that the person who does the lead role, he is into some conspiracies. But I remember they were trying to like draw a comparison like, well, this is that because, some of the stuff that he was saying, but if you actually look back, they actually started the script, from my understanding, from what I read, they actually started the script 2 years before they actually wrote it. And that specific conspiracy that we're talking about, it involves a letter and then 3 letters. That was when, like in 2017?
I think 2016. It was right around the time when Trump was either becoming president or was president. So around that time frame.
So I know it was somewhere over there.
Right.
It's a little foggy because it's been a while, but they started this film way before that. So how can
Yeah.
you make this? I mean, I get it if you're going to try to make a line and try to like mash things up together or draw like a line from here to there.
Right.
All right, man, I get it. I think you're just trying a little bit too hard.
Right.
Because they actually started the inception of this film, this fantastic film that I keep hearing about, which I will watch, did start before then. So
Oh, yeah.
to draw this comparison is completely nonsense. If anything, what people should be taking away, which again, it seems like they're winning, you know, like all the bashing, all the poopy posting on them.
Did you say
not
poopy posting?
I did.
My guy.
Are you proud of me?
Yeah, you gotta stop hanging around with your kid.
I know. But nothing's sticking, you know,
nothing's
and people
sticking
are
on it.
going, people are watching this film, and you could tell by the numbers, you know, where,
Oh, yeah.
you know, people are watching this. It's beating
Mhm.
Indiana Jones, like we said. It's beating Transformers. It's beating all of these things. And not just that, like all this film is trying to do, take away, which I don't understand how it's political, but in some sense, I
It's
can
a
see
little
it's
political,
political.
buddy. It's super
But
political.
like you could separate all these things and just see it as the artwork that it is. It's trying to bring awareness to something
right.
horrific that's happening,
Right.
not just in South America. It's happening all over the world, and we know it through Epstein, which, you know, we have recently adjudicated Maxwell. However, for some reason we can't find a list, so
Right.
I guess she's just, you know, dealing to Ghost
yeah.
or something. I'm not
Right.
too sure, or I don't know, some Beanie Babies or
Oh, yeah.
something. I'm not sure, but this is a serious thing. So I don't understand why the mainstream media is not focusing and honing in on that aspect. Because look, just 2 days ago, a U.S.-based organization recently busted for falsely separating children from their families as a part of their operations, separating children from their families.
Which means, if you guys are listening, that means on purpose.
Mhm.
They did it purposely, separating kids from their families.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was part of
Right.
their business operations. And here, July 7th, Fox reported Texas sex offender charged with a sex trafficking allegedly enticed a child victim through Snapchat. And this individual's name, I'm not going to name him because I'm not going to glorify these guys or even want anyone to. He does not deserve, or anyone who
Yeah, we
participates in
don't-
this.
yeah.
We're not going to prop their names. That's probably why I don't think that's why he did it, but I'm just not going to say his name. But you guys could look it up. Age 24, was charged with harboring a runaway child, and he got first-degree felony charge of child trafficking and engaging in sexual conduct. And then here's another story. February 8th, 2023, Dolly City in Florida, a family sentenced after running a decade-long human trafficking ring
A decade, guys.
Decade. of daycare. It's a daycare. This is where we're taking our kids.
You're right.
ABC Channel 7 reported. So, and this is just me scratching the surface on these last few days.
Oh, yeah.
These are just
Nope.
4 days. Imagine
Mhm.
what's happening on the daily, and imagine globally. Because here,
Yep.
all I grabbed was 2 states, 2 days, and this is what we got
Right.
reported. So now imagine that 365
Oh,
days
yeah.
throughout the year.
No, and it happens across the world, man. Like,
Mhm.
in 2017, I volunteered for a charity across the world in Fiji called
Mhm.
Homes of Hope. They
Mhm.
were a shelter. They would buy out girls from these trafficking rings, teach the girls how to be, functioning members of human society.
Mhm.
And what do you know? They weren't part of that anymore.
Mhm.
And so once I figured out how to help these girls, the stories from these girls was just astronomical, man. These stories were so sad. And if it can happen in Fiji, a third world country around the world,
Mhm.
what makes you think that it can't happen here? The movie even tells us we are among the largest consumers
Mhm.
of this stuff.
Mhm.
We're the largest consumers.
Yeah.
And in
yeah.
Fiji, the way they get these girls is through taxi cabs. So they'll get in a taxi cab, and then after going a while, they pick the girl up from the spot, take her to the next spot, and they'll traffic these girls through the taxi cabs, which is incredibly sad because a lot of the people on Epstein's Island were from these third world countries. And it blows my mind. I literally have a shirt that says "Stop Rape." that I led the women's march.
Well, that might have been appropriate for you to wear today.
No.
No,
I had to
you don't
look
think
clean
so?
for the single ladies
Oh,
on the
that's
camera.
true. And plus,
Come
it's
on.
our first episode. We
Right.
don't
I
wanna
had
be
to
too
come out
hyperbolic.
with the collar, knitted polo.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Well, you look fantastic.
And then you're dressed in a
t-shirt.
gray.
But that's how I
t-shirt.
want to be known.
That's
you
your
know?
vibe.
That is my
That's your
humility
vibe.
being expressed through, my body.
Right. Exactly.
But no, man, like it's insane. And here instead, what we're getting from the news, they want to glorify films such as like Cuties. I don't know if you were aware of
No,
that.
I don't know what Cuties is.
Oh, dude.
Never heard of Cuties,
Let me
man.
talk about this. So Cuties is basically Cuties was a film that came out on Netflix. I don't remember the year, but basically it's a story. I didn't watch it, because I was not going to do that to myself, and I don't think anyone else should. It's horrific in the sense. But basically, Cuties was a Netflix film, and it got a bunch of backlash for it because it was a bunch of underage girls. Like, we're talking about like 8,
Underage.
9, 10. Yeah.
Under
and
double
basically,
digits.
the film is just going through this, the story of these girls becoming performers.
Right.
Not just any kind of performers.
Oh.
Exactly. So
got it.
the issue was, okay, if there were performers like maybe dance, appropriate, maybe performing arts through school, that would be a different story.
Right.
However, they were dancing very erotically, and that was the big backlash. Because and if the creators of this film and the critics were basically saying, oh, well, it's about a story about, girls, how difficult it is for them to grow up,
Right.
and, going through like puberty, blah, 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 blah. But okay, that's maybe like a very incredibly microscopic minority.
Oh yeah, it's a minority.
Because the film is depicting little girls basically on the trajectory to become adult performers.
Right.
Like, this is not normal, right? And they were performing like things of that sort.
yeah.
And so that's what the backlash was, and they were trying to justify it. Well, it's just a film, but it's like, hey, you don't get it.
Right.
What's actually happening behind the film, though, they actually still had to perform those things,
Right.
independent of whether it was recorded for a film or not.
Mm-hmm.
They still had to engage in
That was
those
their
types
job.
of performances.
Yeah.
So let's remove the film aspect. You're still trying to get these underage girls to
Right.
perform very just not appropriate.
You can just say
acts,
erotically, buddy.
Erotic,
erotically. That's a good word for it.
But yeah, I mean, they want to praise that, but we'll look at this tweet. Charlie Kirk is talking about it. He recently posted this in July 10th, but again, it's bringing awareness to what is happening, and
It's an
with
epidemic.
the trafficking,
An actual one.
and this is why this is a big deal for like open borders, because look, just 350,000 unaccompanied minors have already come across Joe Biden's open borders.
350,000.
Which of 85,000 of those children have gone missing, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Tens of thousands more have fallen victims to massive child smuggling, child labor operations. And from our understanding, the individual who, I think it was Tim Ballard is the one who helped create this film, or he might be a producer or something. Yes. He talked about how 6 million children, more than that, this is what's happening to 6 million children. That's more than any time in history.
Oh yeah.
And so not just sex trafficking, they're going into laboring, and another disgusting thing, organ harvesting.
We won't even touch on the organ harvesting, because that's a whole nother podcast episode in itself.
It's dark, but it's totally in tandem with like everything else that's happening, because this should not be happening to children. And he also mentioned under 5 years old.
Yeah.
And
what's even crazier is that we have the TikTok video of this lady saying she never saw the video or never was able to see the movie in theaters. And then when you go to the comment section, the video is okay. The comment section is really where it comes in handy, where all of these different people are saying the AC just happened to run out at my theater as well. And it's not just 1 or 2 people, guys. It's 300, 400, 500 people, all at different theaters, all saying, hey, the theater, they shut it down because the AC in my theater wasn't working. Well, when they went into the theater, the AC was working. They went into the concessions to buy food. That was working. But all of a sudden, when they went to the movie theater and went inside to watch their movie, it wasn't working. And to close out the story, man, you guys got to watch the movie. And human trafficking is bad. And you're a piece of shit if you partake in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's arguing against that.
No.
There's nothing that will like make any sane person think otherwise.
I would say shots fired, But that's for our next story.
Yep, which brings us, that is a perfect segue.
Perfect segue to the Parkland shooting, guys.
Yeah, Parkland shooting. So jury acquits former Florida deputy of failing to protect students in Parkland school shooting.
Just
and
a
this
crazy
is an
story.
important story because I know it's this is a news story insofar as like it was reported on June 29th. But this is a story that happened in February 2018. And it happened in a high school in Florida, Highland Park.
Yeah, it was a mass shooting in a high school.
Yeah, in a high school at Parkland, Florida. Perpetuated, which again, I'm not going to say the name. You guys could go out there. But of 24, who he is currently serving life in prison with no parole, killed 17 people. 14 of them were students. 3 of them were faculty. And this is just another tragic story of mass shootings. And so the reason I want to really talk about this.
Tell us the reason. Tell us.
But let me get a little bit into this, just so we kind of understand the framing that I'm going to get into. So a Florida jury on Thursday acquitted a former sheriff's deputy accused of failing to protect students during the 2018 mass shooting at Parkland's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Scott Pearson, which is the deputy officer that was at the high school, the school resource officer on the duty when a gunman entered a building in February 14th, 2018 and opened fire, killing 17 and wounding another 17, which that part I wasn't aware of, had been charged with 11 counts of child neglect, culpable negligence, and perjury. Nice. So the big thing about this story, again, it's an old story because we heard plenty about it. This was an officer who, while the gunman was going off and going on his rampage, this officer, Scott Peterson, failed to protect children.
He failed to protect the people. He was a police officer, guys. Mm-hmm. His job was to protect the children.
To serve and protect.
And he didn't protect the children. The Parkland shooter. Mm-hmm. How crazy is that? A lot of people who agree with Eddie and I would say the more police you have on schools, the better. They're going to protect us. They're a deterrent. Mm-hmm. But no. The person who was hired, whose job it was to protect, couldn't even protect the people. Mm-hmm. And to be fair to the cop, he was up against what? A pistol versus a machine gun? Like, he might have had. I'd probably be hiding too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point because I understand, like, you don't know exactly what the gunman has. However, you did sign up for something. Mm-hmm. You understand.
Like, bro, that's your job.
What the potential. Exactly.
That's your job, buddy.
You literally signed up for this. So you know what you might potentially go up against.
Right.
Maybe it might just be someone just causing a little bit of drama and you have to escort them out the school premises and, to keep the kids safe and whatnot. But no, I understand that this was a guy who came in, went through his carnage and rampage, killed 17 people. 14 of them were not children, but young adults, teenagers. 3 of them were faculty, and as we just learned, 17 were injured. But you literally signed up for this. Now, my purpose for bringing this up isn't necessarily to, I'm sure he went through some sort of traumatic experience, and I'm not going to go through the story again. We know that he fled because he was scared for his life, or that he heard shots elsewhere, so he just wasn't going to make it in time. Whatever. It's all been said. The reason I bring this up is not to twist the knife a little bit more, but just to make a broader point. Here's a story where now we know that he is acquitted from all of his things that he's being sued for and whatnot. Everything that he's being charged, rather. Yet, the same government who's trying to tell us, hey, just give up your arms. Mm-hmm. We'll be the one to keep you safe.
Right.
Here's a story to exemplify, actually, no, and not just that.
Right.
When the person who's signing up for this duty to actually serve and protect young adults or teenagers, he's not doing it. Not doing it at all. And so I wanted to bring up some other stuff because in his, while he was being tried, while Peterson gets his life back, celebrating, because at the end when the jury found him to be innocent, he was celebrating, hugging his attorney, etc. Right? But here you have the parents of the children or the parents who lost their children to this tragedy, just standing right there on the sidelines while this guy's hugging and parading about how he got his life back, which again, he should have his life for sure.
Oh yeah.
But what about the parents? You failed your duty to protect and serve these children. And so I wanted to just exemplify this. We have a story of Deshani versus Winnebago City Social Service Department in 1989, where the Social Service Department had no duty to protect a young boy from an abusive father. Here's a story where the Supreme Court ruled, these government institutions have no obligation to protect.
No, they have no. And what's crazy about it is, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I really have no problem with the police officer, not getting involved, because that police officer has his own kids, his own family.
Yeah.
And I'm not a father, but I know you're a father.
Absolutely.
So I know you would know if you were in that situation. You'd be like, well, like, yeah, it sucks for the other kids, but I really like my family. And I can't knock a police officer for taking care of his family. But what I would have loved to see more from him is, hey, maybe I could have done a little more. Maybe I could have helped the kids get out of it instead of attacking the shooter. Or, when he called for backup, maybe he would have called for extra backup. Or, cops travel in pairs.
Yeah.
We all know there is a buddy nearby.
Yeah.
Two's better than one. So I would have just liked to see more out of him. And when you brought up this Supreme Court case to me, where, the police officer who's hired to protect the schools is now taken back and said, okay, nope, you're found innocent. You're looking after your own life. You can't do your job further if you don't look at your own life.
Exactly.
The opportunity cost of you being alive is way better than your opportunity cost of you not being alive. When I heard that, it actually changed my opinion on whether I want police in schools or not. Because I'm sitting here as someone who got out of school and going to go back and get his PhD, thinking, man, what's the point of having a police officer at the school if he's just there to intimidate people? Like, doesn't that escalate the whole problem of police maybe being too brutal or over-policing? It seems to be adding more to the fire than it's taking away from the fire.
And it's setting a precedent.
Right. Setting the precedent.
I mean, this is my whole thing. I mean, I have more examples where, like in Colorado and Castle Rock versus Gonzalez in 2005, we had a woman sue a police department for almost the same reason. The police failed to protect her from her husband after he violated a restraining order, abducted, and killed their 3 children. And that's an even bigger tragedy. But again, the Supreme Court decided to rule that, you know what? It's not our obligation to protect you, buddy.
Right.
This is our government. This is the same institution that's trying to tell us, like, hey, no, it's okay. Just give us our gun or give us your guns. We'll put it right here in this nice little shelf,
Yeah.
and we'll protect you.
Right.
When, in fact, no, you're not, because we keep seeing it time and time again that you failed to protect us in 1989, you failed to protect us in 2005, and now you're failing to protect us.
Right.
Or at the very least, hold an officer who did sign off on this contract, like, you know what, this is my duty to protect and serve. And again, he did not.
And I while I understand that gun violence is a constitutional right, New Zealand also has a lot of guns, but they have way less percentage of gun violence per capita. And so you have to think, what is America doing wrong with school shootings that New Zealand's doing differently? Because New Zealand doesn't have metal detectors when they go in, and they definitely don't have cops going in and being a deterrent. And maybe on the next podcast I'll do a little bit deeper dive into what New Zealand's doing differently. But I'm sitting here asking the question is, tons of other countries in the world have a lot of different guns, but none of them have as big of a problem as we do with guns. So what are they doing differently that we aren't doing differently? And I think there's a lot of common ground that to solve these issues. I don't think background checks are going to solve the issue.
No, absolutely not.
A kid's not, buying a gun anyway and, getting a background check. He's not old enough to buy a gun. He doesn't care. But I do think this case leads to a larger issue. And the issue is, how do we protect our schools and the kids. How do we do it? Nobody knows how to do it, but all these other countries seem to be doing a better job, but they're not doing anything a whole lot different than what we're doing. And I was reading a report about over policing in neighborhoods where, and we'll hear about it next year because, you know, obviously police brutality only gets broadcasted during election years, which is a whole nother point in general.
To use that as like political leverage.
Right.
Pretty much.
And so I was doing research into that, and over policing, and they would over police a certain area where they said, okay, most of the crime is occurring in these 2 blocks. So we're going to have a ton of cops in that area to bring down a whole lot of crime in that area. But my question is, why do we use that same philosophy for schools when the kids themselves really aren't, they're not shooters, most of them. You know a shooter when you see one. Yeah. Every parent looks at their kid and goes, oh yeah, this dude's got a screw loose. And it comes down to what the parent is teaching them. The parent knows their kids better than whatever I could. And I was talking to my brother about this the other day, and he made a fantastic point. He said the issue isn't that kids having access to guns. The issue is the parents knowing that a screw's loose, letting their child go to school, and not putting them into ways to fix their mental issues. You're not born perfect, and the world makes you fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think the gun issue is something, in some ways, you don't fix a problem by going directly towards it. I think it's something peripheral. It's like you fix all these other areas and then you fix the gun issue. So you tackle it not as your focal point, but rather you do it inadvertently. Like you tackle all the things that are peripheral to that focal point, and then you fix the issue. It's a whole complex problem. We could have like a whole podcast on this whole thing. But like, I'll just give one example.
All right, give us an example.
One example that we could do is, well, how about this? How about we start eating better? How about we fix our foods? How about we start exercising?
It's a holistic approach.
Why don't we do all these things? And so exercising, do we love exercising? I sure do. And I know you do, buddy.
Oh, man.
So let's just get into this next story.
Oh, this news article next blew my mind. Okay, MSNBC, and I'm going to read the title of this article.
Dude, I cannot believe this one.
Pandemic fitness trends have gone extreme, literally. And what they're saying is the more you exercise, the more right-wing you are going to be. And that is leading to toxic masculinity and abusive relationships and partner. That blows my mind. Because I don't know about you, Eddie, but I go to the gym every day for about an hour and a half. And so for me, fitness is a huge part of my life.
I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, man. Dude, honestly, I went to Europe for 3 weeks and I came back and your boy just looks like a whale, man. Just a whale. I go into a club and I feel so fat. You know?
You got to run these calories off.
And I was looking at this article and man, I'm going to read you some of the highlights because I highlighted some parts of the article.
We have to read this article. It is insane.
Let me read the very first part of this article. Well, the parts I highlighted. Ready? Physical fitness has always been center to the far right. In Mein Kampf, which, by the way, if you don't know, that is Hitler's manifesto as to why he did what he did, okay? He goes, in Mein Kampf, Hitler fixated on boxing and jiu-jitsu, believing they could help him create an army of millions whose aggressive spirit and tactical and impeccably trained bodies, combined with quote-unquote fanatical love of the fatherland, would do more for the German nation than any mediocre women's training. It then goes on to say, 4 members of the associates of the recent violent Rise Above movement, a self-described premier MMA club of the alt-right, pled guilty to conspiracy to riot after the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Virginia. I'm going to sum up the article for you guys.
I wanted you to talk about this because you're the bigger
I'm a gym buff.
athletic person, the gym guy, where I had to bring up this story. I'm like, please, JT, enlighten us. Like, how do you feel about this? Because it's wild.
It's wild. And so for the people who, I'm not going to read the rest of the article, but I'll sum it out really well for the people who are watching on the live stream, which, by the way, if you haven't followed us on our socials, we're live streaming this at the moment, is a bunch of random Discord kids are getting funneled in to other Discords that have a very, very strong alt-right leaning. And because they're getting funneled into those strong alt-right leanings, they're now more likely to be someone like Andrew Tate,
Mm-hmm.
who is,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much an alpha male at this point.
Yeah.
And it just sounds very disrespectful. We are the fattest nation in the world, man. We're the fattest nation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand how we complain about an obesity epidemic, but on the other hand, we discourage people from going to the gym. It blows my mind.
It makes no sense.
Right.
It's almost like they're intentionally trying to keep us fat in sedentary positions.
Right.
Do absolutely nothing.
Right.
Don't work on our health. Don't eat well.
Right.
We have all these like plastics, these microplastics that are messing with our hormones and all sorts of stuff. But man,
Oh, yeah.
when I read this article, I mean, we had Elon Musk as well as Joe Rogan weighing in on this, which they cannot believe. So like by this standard, which I don't understand who's setting this standard or like who's like well, I know who. It's this
left
this
wing.
person,
We'll
this Cynthia Miller.
It's the far left wing.
But it's exactly, it's the far leftists who are pushing things like that. I mean, they want us to have like body positivity, like, hey, you're extremely obese, right there knocking on death's door, and that's okay. You should feel good about yourself because it's all about compassion.
Right.
Like, pat yourself on the back. You're doing great. But man, when I read this, I was like, this has got to be satire. Like, there's no way this is happening.
What blows my mind is it's a completely real story. Like,
It
this
is.
man behind the... And I understand body positivity, guys.
Uh-huh.
I'm all for body positivity, but no. I mean, come on, dude. There's like 300-pound models on a screen now. And it's like, man, like, you're getting paid to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks to say, but you're getting paid to eat. And it's... What we don't talk about a lot of time is plus-size model destroying the modeling industry, because these models who are super dietarily disciplined, where they're always eating the same thing every day, they are no longer having the same opportunities because now people who are obese are getting those same opportunities. But the point of model is to be thin, is to be what society deems as an attractive woman. And I think I could speak for a lot of people, well, specifically men. I don't find, 400-pound women attractive. And I might get canceled for saying that, which I've been canceled before.
Yeah.
But what blows my mind as
Not
well
your first rodeo.
is when I'm looking at this article too, they pointed out how many kids today are now getting into boxing on TikTok and then going from TikTok, the boxing matches, all the way to alt-right propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys, boxing is a sport. Just because you like sports does not make it so you're an alt-right person. And so I feel like we're decentivizing kids to make a change. And I feel like a lot of the problems in society today would be a lot more fixable if people would just move. You don't have to work out, but just move for like 30, 40 minutes a day. I used to be a depressed kid, a kid who hated his life, hated his family. I ran away at some points in my life, dealt with drug abuse, dealt with alcohol abuse. I dealt with it all. But what switched my life was when I started realizing that when I go to the gym, I work out to better myself. And the magic of going to the gym, which, by the way, nobody's ever going to tell you, is when you go to the gym and you're working out, the magic isn't in that final product. The magic is in going there every single day and doing the same thing over and over and looking at yourself get bigger.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's the and I saw you smile at it. You can't see it on the camera, but this dude was smirking up a storm. And so when I saw this, man, I flipped. It was so dumb. Almost as mad as the next article that we're going to talk about, the Michigan misgendering.
That one's beautiful, but I just very
that
quickly.
One's beautiful.
Well, in
Eddie,
the sense of like,
Eddie.
in the sense of like how idiotic it is, and we've been
Okay.
hearing about
Right.
it, and like the only reason why we're talking about it, like, look, we are in the state of Arizona.
Right.
Why would we care about a Michigan bill?
Right.
But I'll get to that. But the last point that I wanted to make.
Yeah, talk about it.
Okay, so they want to talk about getting healthy now is an issue where, okay, if you're getting healthy, you're exercising, home fitness, you're a neo-Nazi, you're a white supremacist, and choose your euphemism, right?
Right. You're part of the alt-right.
You just isolated people who actually might agree with all of your other idiot opinions, except this one. I'll give you an example. The Krasenstein brothers. they're totally fit, and they actually weighed in on this. Another one, a big left-leaning political, not really political commentator, but internet personality, Hassan Piker.
Oh,
like,
Hassan.
This guy's like juiced up, you know? He's like bold. Huge. Okay, by your standard, you also put him in the far right category, and I can imagine he's very happy about that.
No, he's
and
pissed.
So now you're throwing all these people who potentially would agree on you with all these other idiotic opinions that you might have, such as the one that we see before us. I don't know who you were trying to cater to with an article like this. Like, you're calling people who want to stay healthy. I mean, we were just talking about this whole mass shooting, and to fix the mass shooting issue peripherally. Don't tackle it directly, because you're not going to do anything meaningful there. And also, it's a constitutional issue that you're going to go, because in my opinion, it says very explicitly, shall not be infringed. Any law, in my opinion, whether it's like, I'm an absolutist in that regard.
Right.
I like to give a little bit of wiggle room, though.
Just a tad.
Just a little whisper,
right.
a little afterthought of wiggle room.
Oh,
but, here we have an issue. It's a mental health issue, and this is something that could fix everyone's mental issue if they just got up and walked. Because not just that.
Do something. Just move. Do a movement check.
Every time you're pushing your boundaries. You're pushing yourself.
Right.
You get a little dopamine hit. That little dopamine hit, the healthy dopamine hit, not just like watching like pornography or anything like that. No, like the ones that matter, like working out, doing something for yourself. You're going to get so much benefit from doing these. So I don't understand who she's trying to appeal to with this, because now... I don't know. I guess
I don't understand the whole point of the article, buddy. Any scientist will tell you that exercising is good for you.
Yeah.
And any sane person's like, yeah, you should probably go to the gym more often.
Yeah. That's probably one of the first things that you'd suggest is like, well, are you at home like miserable in your four walls? Like, you should probably get up and touch grass, man. But let's get into this Michigan one.
Yeah. Speaking of touching grass, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
maybe we should go touch some in Michigan, huh?
Yeah. This article is crazy.
But so Michigan House passes a bill that could misgender, Michigan House passes a bill that could make misgendering someone a felony. So
$10,000 fine. $10,000.
Man, this is a wild one because Michigan State House of Representatives have passed a bill that could make misgendering someone a felony punishable by prison, which I looked into. It's about 5 years or a $10,000 fine. It's a pretty wild one.
It's wild.
Now, again, this has only passed through the House with a 59-50 vote. It has to go to the Senate, then to the governor's office. However, is not set in stone. But why are we talking about a Michigan state, and we're not even living in the state of Michigan? The only reason...
Yeah, we're in Arizona, guys, by the way. We're in Arizona.
We are based in Arizona. But the only reason why I'm bringing this up, and I thought it was worthy of exploring and talking about, Jordan Peterson has been talking about this with, he was actually the first one to elucidate something in this capacity in 2016 with a piece of legislation in Canada, Bill C-16. And everyone called him crazy, like, you're looking too much into it. What are you talking about?
Right.
It's just this, it's just that. But his idea was, no, what you're doing is you are forcing people to say things rather than telling someone what you can say. So the issue here is you're compelling speech. There's a difference between like telling people what you can't say, because you can't gather people to go do violence, burn down a building. You can't incite to violence or do anything.
Right, you can't incite this stuff. Right.
So this thing is doing exactly what Jordan Peterson was talking about. What is it now? About 8 years ago? 9 years? No, about 8 years ago.
About 8 years
7
ago.
years, give
about
or take, right? We've been hearing about it, and now it's coming to the U.S. soil, where now we're about to legislate speech in the capacity of like, now you're telling me what I have to say. Right.
So, no, there's a lot to it, man. Like, look, it says the legislation uses the term harassment in its definition to intimidate without defining what would rise to that level.
Exactly.
And then it says two things. It says both sexual orientation and gender identity or expression are listed as classes that will be protected from the mean words. But the question is, what does gender identity or expression mean? And the bill defines this, which is, I feel like it's the true highlight for me on what gender identity is. Because we ask somebody, what is a woman? They never know how to respond. We ask someone, what is a man? They also never know how to respond, to be fair. Mm-hmm. So here's what they define as gender identity or expression. Mm-hmm. Gender identity or expression means having or being perceived as having a gender-related self-identity or expression, whether or not associated with an individual's assigned sex at birth. What does that mean? Exactly. Am I crazy to think that makes no sense? You're just reiterating, gender identity or expression means gender identity or expression.
Well, I mean, think about this. Like, there's people who proclaim themselves to be gender fluid. So now I got to remember what you are today, but I don't even know if you're going to change your gender tomorrow.
And what if you don't know either? What if you're talking to someone who identifies as a they, them, and they're so offended that they sue you or call the cops on you? Bro, because you didn't know by their looks of their pronoun, you are now getting a $10,000 fine. And the implications of this, which the article points on, is unreal. The implications are just far reaching.
Well, it's vague. It's unspecified, so no one knows exactly what. I mean, we could go on here and see it. So the legislation seeks to amend the Ethnic Intimidation Act in the Michigan Penal Code to state that a person is guilty of a hate crime if that person maliciously and intentionally does any of the following to an individual based in whole or in part on an actual or perceived characteristic of an individual, and goes on to list intimidating another individual as one of the actions. So the legislation also uses harassment in its definition to intimidate without defining what would rise to that level. So everything's vague about this bill.
Yeah, and they used a guy named Wagner, and who he is he's a distinguished professor. I don't know where he works at. I'm just reading the article out loud. Yeah. But the last paragraph is really, really keen, okay? And I'm going to read it verbatim. Wagner explained that if this law passed, someone could listen to a preacher and be offended and intimidated because their perceived gender identity is being attacked. And he's referring to biblical scripture, which obviously says, you're either a man or a female, and you can only like man or female. Yeah. It's the only way it goes. Can't go man, can't go female. Can't do that. And then he goes on to say, he said that the policy determines what is criminal after the action in stark opposition of the due process required by the Constitution. That blows my mind. I mean, the implications of a preacher going to make a speech and then going and making the speech and then somebody getting offended. It's like, yeah, man, you can't be having this. You're out. I don't want you as a preacher anymore. Yeah. And then going and telling the authorities, that preacher is now in prison. Michigan would not be protecting this under religious liberty. And I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a Supreme Court case.
Yeah. Well,
especially
that's something that I was going to move on to. It's like, okay, it's only passed the House with 59-50 votes. It now has to go to the Senate for a vote. And let's hypothetically say it does, and the governor signs, and it moves through its proper course, right? Someone's going to have to appeal this and be like, okay, it's going to the Supreme Court. Because it's a First Amendment issue.
And a religious issue, too, if that's the case.
Man, you're hitting, like, all your bases of, like, big no-nos,
every
right?
issue.
So, everything in the First Amendment, like, you're hitting on. Right. You're touching your bases here. And I'm being a little hyperbolic, but seriously.
No, you are.
It's like, First Amendment, freedom of speech. And there's a reason why we don't have a piece of legislation defining hate, because what do you define hate? My interpretation of hate is totally different than yours. And to be honest and truthful, like, dude, there's nothing that you could say to me to, like, really upset me. It's very difficult to get me upset. So that's my standard, though. What if I'm talking to frail little Jimmy over here who, like, wilts at every little thing I say?
Yeah, a guy who's
it's
retarded.
Like, now I have to, like, censor my speech as well as you tell me what I have to say just so I could accommodate your feelings, which... It's like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I'm so sorry.
No.
But now I'm, like, also sympathetic of, the people who are living in rural states who, they're just doing their thing, living off the land. They're working on their farms. And they decide, hey, honey, like, let's go to the city this week. And they come here, go to Michigan, to one of the big cities. And they're like, I don't know, go to a Starbucks because they want some coffee, and biological homeboy here on the register, it's like, oh, hello, good sir. It's like, well, actually, I identify.
Yeah, hello, good sir. No, hello, good ma'am. Thank you very much.
And here you have this like
Right.
old boomer over here had no idea what the hell's going on, and now they have to be adjudicated because you feel some sort of way. So,
and this isn't the first case either that's going up to the Supreme Court. There's one case that's being developed on the state level that may or may not go. We don't have the article up, but what it is a Catholic school hired someone who later comes out as homosexual, and they fire that guy because obviously, more modernly, the Catholic Church says yes, you can be gay, but the Catholic school fired him for being gay because he didn't align with the mission values. So now it's like, okay, well, what happens? The Supreme Court now is protecting people based on sex, gender, and identity. They're protected now, but also the Catholic school is protected under religious liberty. And so in about a year and a half, maybe even longer, you're going to see a Supreme Court case come along where these two rights are being clashed. The exact issue we're talking about. What weighs more? A person's freedom of speech and religious liberty versus a person's gender identity and sexual orientation. Which one is more important according to the American values and dependent on when they wrote the Constitution? And so when that Supreme Court case comes up, articles like this, where the Michigan is misgendering people because of a felony, it's going to blow up little issues like this. I can't even tell you how big it's going to blow up.
Yeah, dude.
It's going to rock the world.
It is.
We set the pace.
And I think our founding fathers knew how dangerous it is. Because, again, everything's subjective to each individual. I mean, look, like I study personality pretty well. We like to think that, we perceive the world identically, like that the world is revealing itself identically to each individual, which is not the case. Right. Like you see something in the world, I see something different in the world, and that's why we work to cooperate, because we make each other a broader resource to each other. But not everyone's the same in the sense of like, look, again, I said I might be a small little guy in the sense of like, I'm not that big or anything.
You're not a gym buff. Remember, you're not part of the alt-right.
I'm not the gym man.
You're part of the alt-left.
Which I'm working on. I just never have the time. But you are, However, man, you could tell me anything you want. I'm not gonna break down. Right. Like, I'm just like, okay. I process it logically and reasonably, and I'm like, whatever.
And I don't want people to think that we're hating on people with a different sexual orientation. I personally do not care what your orientation is.
Exactly.
And I assume you don't either. My twin is gay. At all. So when people accuse me of being homophobic or things like that, I say no. This is just my opinion. My twin is gay, and I love my twin to death. I plan on moving with her anywhere she wants to go. Whatever she wants, she gets. And I think this Michigan story is a bombshell story.
Dude, it is a bombshell story.
But speaking of bombshell stories, man, we have
let's get into the next
possible war crime coming out. And this story blows my mind, okay? It says Biden says sending cluster bombs to Ukraine was a difficult decision, but they needed them. Yep. Okay, if people who aren't war buffs here, what a cluster bomb is a bunch of bombs. Some of them activate, some of them don't. And they just drop them anywhere they want. And so, years come to pass after whatever war happens, those bombs could come off at any time.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're permanently setting a zone with explosive material. It's like if you guys have ever played Call of Duty, you go around a corner and you get hit with a claymine or a claymore.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Well, there's still a bunch of like bombs that haven't detonated from the Second World War.
Yeah. No, they will be there forever. So this is a war crime. What Ukraine is wanting to do, and Biden is saying a firm no on this one, which, maybe it's because of the skiing he's doing, but man, I agree with Biden on this. He's doing a solid move here.
Now, from my understanding, he actually did go through with this. That it was.
Oh, he did.
He did.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna take that back.
Well, let's
Biden,
read.
You suck,
let's read this. So President Joe Biden told CNN's Fareed Zakaria Friday that it was a difficult decision to provide Ukraine with cluster munitions for the first time, but that he was ultimately convinced to send the controversial weapons because of Kiev needs ammunition
Biden.
in its counter offense against Russia. Hey, buddy, that's why I'm here. I'm picking. I'm leading you here.
Yeah.
So the White House announced Friday that the president had approved the transfer of cluster munitions to Ukraine, the latest instance where the U.S. had provided Kiev with weapons it initially resisted sending into war. So, I quote, "It was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies. I discussed this with our friends up on the Hill," Biden said, adding the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition.
And that's code words, by the way. What he's saying is, I ran it by my allies, so I made sure I didn't get in too much trouble. That's really what he's saying, man. This is a war crime.
Or at the very least, he thinks he's talking. Because again, we got to remember, this guy's not even like mentally capable. He's probably just staring at the wall. He's like,
yeah, give him some more. Give him some more blow, buddy. Give him the blow.
Yeah, well, he's probably staring at the wall. And he's
right.
like, come on, man, we gotta get this munition.
Good impression.
Maybe a little bit more blow. But anyways, the interview will air in the full on for Reed Zechariah's GPS on Sunday. So the cluster munitions that the U.S. will lead to Ukraine will be capable of U.S. providing. Okay, well, basically, I went through this. And basically what it's saying is, I think he was just preaching to the choir in the sense of like, he wants to make the American people think that, hey guys, I was really thinking hard, like I did the math here, and I just came to the conclusion that it's just better to give cluster munitions to Ukraine.
Man, that's crazy.
Even though it's like basically 80 countries, especially the European countries, ban these things. I mean, it's basically right here. There are more than 100 countries, including the UK, France, Germany, who have outlawed the munitions under the I just lost my place. Outlawed the munitions under the conventional of cluster munitions.
Right.
So he went through with it. And Russia now, we're getting in bigger trouble because Russia did say, you do this, we're going to have to retaliate in some capacity. I mean, not that exact verbiage, but that's the spirit of what Russia's saying.
And Russia's right, man. Like, I hardly agree with what Russia does.
Right.
But there's two things that I agree with Russia on this part. One, the cluster bomb sent to Ukraine is an undeniable war crime. Mm-hmm. Those could go off at any time in the next 1 to 500 years, unless you know exactly where they're at and exactly what bombs will detonate. But it speaks to a larger issue that Putin has. Mm-hmm. The issue Putin has with NATO is that they're becoming more and more aggressive. Because originally, North Atlantic Trade Organization, that's what NATO stands for, I think. Anyways, it's mainly just for European countries. It's mainly just for a small group of people to band together, much like the EU, but expanding it to across the pond to the United States. And so when Putin is looking at all these areas with the, areas around the Netherlands now being accepted in, Poland being accepted in, all of Russia's neighbors are now being accepted into NATO. And Putin's point about NATO is that they're becoming way too aggressive, way too aggressive. And I understand that point. So from Putin's point of view, NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is what we just looked it up here, they're becoming more and more aggressive at the same time that the United States, the world's largest superpower and largest military, is now sending bombs to Ukraine to fight the Russians. Ukraine is just a proxy war at this point, and NATO is the tools to make it happen.
Yep, that's a vehicle in which we're
exacerbating
the problem. We're
very
magnifying. But yeah, this is where do I even start with this? It brings me a lot of fear, especially being a parent. We're constantly striving to be better as Americans. We're constantly trying to do things right. But here we have an administration that's constantly putting us in the back burner. It seems like everything is, just ulterior motives, special interest. I mean, we just found out not too long ago that they were getting like wire transfers from China. Like, I don't remember exactly, so do not quote me on this, but I don't know if it was like weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, but he was getting about like $100,000. I think it was $106,000 in those increments, whether weekly or bi-weekly
Yeah.
or monthly. I'm
It's
not
crazy,
sure.
man.
But we know now for sure, and I forgot who reported, but we know that I think it was actually someone who he actually put in jail. I mean, of course, because he's Biden, criminalizing all of his, anyone who's going up against him. But we know that he's in the pockets of people. We know that he's selling people or the America out to, whatever effort that all these other countries are a part of. But in terms of Russia right now, we're committing all the big no-nos for them. For example, the cluster.
Dude, we
For
are
example, we're
pissing them off.
expanding. Yeah,
We're
put it lightly.
we're poking the bear and just waiting for the bear to attack us.
Exactly. So, and that's just to put it lightly, man. Like, we're doing everything to piss them off. We're expanding NATO, or at least where I know today we had a story that there's a path that exists for Ukraine to join NATO. However, we can't do that during like war times,
Right.
and so we know if Ukraine does join NATO, I mean that's like giving Putin a thumbs up for them to just keep engaging on war. But like, man, we just got to look this in like the bigger picture. I mean, we're doing we're doing this, yet we're also continually and perpetually, it seems, sending billions of our taxpayer dollars to Ukraine. So this is becoming one big old mess.
And there's a reason why. There's a reason why we can't have Ukraine in NATO.
Mm-hmm.
And for people watching who maybe don't keep up with it, I watched the NATO summit today. It's day 2, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we can't have Ukraine in NATO is because it automatically triggers a war with BRICS.
Correct.
And the United States does not want a war with BRICS. You got Saudi Arabia,
Brazil.
You got Brazil,
India.
you got India, you got China, and Russia. You have all these gigantic places. Saudi Arabia is where you get your money.
Mm-hmm.
India, where you get your products.
Mm-hmm.
Brazil, the closest neighbor to the United States. China, where you get a lot of manufacturing. Russia, probably has the most bodies out of any of those, besides China, of course. But China can't send them because it's across the sea, whatever.
Yeah.
And
if
so,
you want to make things worse, too, I believe there was like 41 other countries who applied to BRICS last night.
yeah, no,
So-
it's
Well, maybe not last night, but at least the story.
it's turning into World War III, and we've been in World War III for a long time. Not World War III in the terms of physical war, but in the terms of a war of propaganda, which is how all wars start. And it blows my mind to see that there's no middle ground. I understand Putin can't be taken territory left and right. He took Georgia a couple years ago. He took a part of Ukraine, which, by the way, Ukraine's never going to get that territory back.
Yeah.
There's no way, unless you go into Moscow, take over Russia, then they'll get it back. And so he's taken over a part of Ukraine, looking to take over more Ukraine, and nobody stops there. Adolf Hitler had met with the British Prime Minister multiple times to figure out, like, hey, are you going to stop when you get this one place? And Adolf Hitler reportedly told all of these world leaders, yeah, I'll stop when I get this one. Then when he gets the one, he never stops at one.
He's like, I think I want another. Maybe this one.
Well, I mean, think about it. When you're a kid, you reach into the cookie jar, you get one cookie, you eat it, and you're like, oh, my parents aren't around. Let me get another cookie. Then you get another cookie, and you're like, oh, I can get more. And you keep having the sweets and the sweets and the sweets until after a long time, you ate the whole cookie jar.
Without even realizing.
And then your parents catch you, and you're fucked.
Yeah.
That's what's happening with Russia at the moment, to put it like a child's analogy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said without you even realize it, but I mean, kids are smart. And I say these people are definitely smart. They know what they're doing. I think they know exactly what they're doing. Like, how do you not listen to... Here's one thing that frustrates me. It's like, it seems as though... Well, first off, let's frame it this way. As a president, you work for the American people. You are supposed to represent the macrocosm of the United States.
Right.
And it seems like the consensus is we don't really want to get into war. So why are we doing things such as this, sending, the cluster munitions, even though Russia is like, hey, buddy, don't do that because, you're poking me. You're poking me here. And then he also said not 1 inch, NATO is not going to expand 1 inch to the east. And then we're doing all kinds of... And we're doing all these things. But it just seems like we're just being sold out constantly, and we're not listening to the American people. We don't want to get into war, and these are things that are of very avoidable in the sense of, like, for example, this is the part of like Trump where, and I understand for all of his flaws, but man, when he says that, you know, this war would end just like that, I really do believe him. I mean, years ago, he told China, like, you want to mess with us?
You want to fuck around? You'll find out.
Yeah, and he told Russia the same thing. You're gonna mess with us? Oh, okay, well, it'd be
right. And he demonstrated that with the Moab in Saudi Arabia, or
and maybe
I think Iraq.
And maybe there's, well, yeah, I mean, he did a lot of great things. I mean, for bringing peace to the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, he did a lot. But I'm saying, like, for sure, if Trump was in this position, I do believe him when he says, if I was in that position, I'd get this war ended just like that. Yeah, I believe him. He's a bit hyperbolic. That's kind of what I like about him. But he's honest, even though the time when he was like, well, CNN, I believe it was CNN, told him, like, well, you're caught calling women's pigs or whatever. He's like, nope. That's not true.
No, just one pig.
Just Rosie O'Donnell.
Right.
But he
ultimate
owns
team moment.
He owns
forever.
it. Like he's right there. I personally love him for that reason. I think people love him for that reason. It's like he just owns it. He's just telling the truth. That's probably what scares, you know, the reptilian overlords, but like that's okay. I think that's why there's constantly like pushback against him. But to bring it back to what we're talking about.
Bring the point back.
You know, we're doing all these things to poke the bear, and I really do believe, hopefully, my personal opinion, in 2024, we do get someone as strong as him, or, you know, Donald Trump, and could really like negotiate these things.
I don't mind. I mean, we're heading to the end of the podcast, but I really don't mind a weaker foreign policy president. I really don't mind. In fact, I think it's about time that somebody else besides the United States take the center stage.
Yeah.
As the person who dictates foreign policy and leads the world. Do I think Russia is good enough for it? No. But there are some countries I would be more than happy to hand it off to. You know, I love Britain's foreign policy, but I also love China's foreign policy, right? They're very cooperative. And hence they're literally putting the opposition together for the superpowers. And I also love India. And so I don't understand why there has to be
allies, I think.
I don't understand why there has to be one superpower. And that one superpower rules everything, like the one ruler. I don't understand that. There could be multiple rulers, and the issue with United States and having these multiple superpowers is nobody's working together to solve these issues. You know, China's not bad. Russia's not all bad. United States isn't all bad. Each one of them have their redeeming qualities. And I just wish we got to see a little more of that.
Where everyone just comes together. I mean, that'd be great.
It would be great. And I think it's possible, but I think we do things on purpose to piss people off. I think Europe, in this case, is sending us into a war, trying to send us into war, much like World War II and FDR, which I can give you the historical context at a later point. Yeah. But I think Europe is trying to send us into a war, and the United States is like, no, we're in 4 wars at the moment. I don't think we need a 5th war. And, you know, China's like, well, yeah, if you don't get in this war, it's down with you guys. And there's a lot of pressure on the United States to perform. And the American people say no, but the people who are making decisions, right, the very small oligarchic people who are making decisions say, yes, we should be in a war.
Because ultimately they're the ones who benefit.
Not the ones that benefit, but they pay the politicians.
Oh, well, for sure.
You know, Navek Ramaswamy just came out and said, here's how political contributions work. Small group of people, they give you hundreds of millions of dollars. They like your policy. Okay, well, that's not how it should be anymore.
I think I saw this where you get the donors actually will get a 10% of that cut, and where it's totally different now. Yeah, no, dude, Vivek has been impressing me lately because he keeps climbing. He's climbing a lot faster and faster, and that's who I was.
We should talk about that on the next podcast because he rose from 0% to 7%.
Yeah, and yeah, man. Well, cool. I think this is a good spot to end it. But anyways, dude, I love this conversation. This is the first episode. This is pilot. So please, everyone, if you enjoyed this and if you made it through this end, I know it's just our first one where we're figuring things out, but we enjoyed ourselves here. If you did too, Follow us on all of our social media pages. Like this video.
Yep.
Subscribe. Turn on the notifications. Do it all. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter.
JOD Podcast on Instagram.
I'm always on there. So is JT.
Yeah.
But until then.
Until then, guys, sayonara, join or die, baby.
All righty, join or die.